Have you ever woken up in the morning, but felt like you were still trapped inside an unfinished dream? Not a beautiful dream, but a loop of exhaustion, self-doubt, and that quiet sense of I'm not enough that follows you through the entire day. I used to be the same. I used to open my eyes with a heavy mind, check my phone, scroll through social media, and let the world tell me who I was before I even had a chance to remind myself. Until one day, I tried something incredibly simple. I spoke the very first words of the day to myself. Not to emails, not to the news, not to comparison, but a declaration. Just one sentence, every morning. And the strange thing is, it changed everything. Today, I want to tell you what happens when you know how to start your morning the right way. Not with coffee, not with your favorite playlist, but with the first words you offer to your own soul. We're going to talk about why the first words you speak each morning become the invisible map that guides your entire day. Why most people lose control in the very first minute, simply because they forget one simple thing. And what can happen if you begin each day the way Dr. David Yonggi once taught? You must speak to your future because the future is listening. There is an interesting thing most people never notice. The very first sentence you speak to yourself in the morning is actually the story you will end up living for the rest of that day. It's like naming a book. You don't need to know how the chapters will unfold yet, but that title will set the tone, shape the feeling, and echo through every page that follows. Modern people tend to do the same thing every morning. Reach for their phone, messages, emails, news. And within less than 3 minutes, their mind has already been filled with voices from the outside world. The market is crashing. A scandal just broke out. Your friends are checking in somewhere you've never been. And suddenly, a new day begins with fear, scarcity, and the sense of falling behind. Not because the world is terrible, but because the mind wasn't given a chance to be guided from within. Scientists call this the priming effect, the starting effect. Whatever you absorb first becomes the filter through which you see everything else. If you start with anxiety, you'll see the whole day through the lens of anxiety. If you start with strength and belief, then even the hard things, though still hard, will feel far less frightening. A friend of mine, Olivia, once told me that she used to start her mornings with a sigh and the sentence, "Another day? I don't know how I'll get through it." And she lived exactly that way. Every day, she struggled, pushed, survived, feeling like everything was happening to her, not because of her choices. Until she changed just one small thing, each morning she looked in the mirror and said, with a voice steady and clear, "I am ready for whatever today brings. I am not here to survive. I am here to shape." Not because she believed it right away, but because she wanted to hear her own voice instead of the voice of her fear. And after a few weeks, the little things began to shift. The way she got out of bed, the way she reacted to bad news, the way she said no when she needed to. That's when I remembered something Dr. David Yonggi once shared. In a conversation, he said, "Spoken faith is like a seed. You speak it, and it begins to incubate the future. You don't just think it. You declare it, because your words shape your reality." From those morning words, he built one of the largest communities in the world. Not because he had a grand plan from the beginning, but because each day he chose to plant one right word at the most vulnerable moment of the day, the moment right after waking up. We cannot control everything that happens during the day, but we can control the first sentence we speak to ourselves. And the miracle is that one well-timed sentence can change the way you walk through the next 12 hours. You can try it as soon as tomorrow morning, before touching your phone, before hearing the world tell you what you should do or how you should feel. Say something simple, something worth believing, something you want to plant, and then watch how everything begins to shift. Your inner voice, if clear enough, can become the compass for every decision, every reaction, every step. But only if you let it speak before the outside world does. And sometimes the only thing standing between you and a better version of yourself is one small sentence spoken early in the morning that you never realized you needed to say. There are mornings when, even before you have a single thought, your past whispers first, you're still the same person. Your mistakes, your broken versions, the things you did before you knew how to do better, they follow you like a shadow. Even when you've already stepped into a brand new day, humans don't just remember memories. We attach identity to memories. Psychologists call it identity attachment to trauma. When a painful experience doesn't stay as a memory but turns into, this is who I am. One failure becomes, I'm a failure. One rejection becomes, I'm not good enough. A mistake from 10 years ago becomes, this is the real me. These labels cling tightly. Not because they're true, but because they're familiar. And strangely, we humans cling to the familiar, even when the familiar hurts. I once spoke with a man named Marcus. He had gone through many struggles in his youth, dropping out of school, losing direction, trying job after job without success. When he grew older, things stabilized, but he still introduced himself with a quiet, heavy sentence. I've never been good enough. I just try. He didn't realize he was locking himself inside a version that no longer existed. He was letting the past sit in the driver's seat while he sat in the passenger seat, watching life go by. One day when we talked about why he always felt inadequate, he sighed and said, "It's just who I am." I asked him, "Or is it only who you used to be?" That question made him fall silent for a long time, as if for the first time he realized he had been living inside a shirt that was far too tight, and had forgotten that he could simply change it. The human mind has a powerful mechanism, the self-fulfilling prophecy. When you believe, I'm not good enough, you behave like someone not good enough, and then the outcomes reinforce that old belief. But that loop is not destiny. It's just a habit that's been repeated. You don't need to deny what happened. You don't need to pretend you never fell apart. You don't need to erase the darker chapters. The only thing you need is the right to write the next page. And you have that right. I remember a gentle yet profound sentence from Dr. David Yonggi. Faith is rewriting your story from heaven's perspective. It gives me a beautiful image, an open book with untouched pages waiting to be written. The past may sit in the introduction, but the introduction never decides the whole book. Maybe you used to be someone else. Maybe you did things you're not proud of. Maybe you believed something very limiting about who you were. But used to be is not who you are. The you of this morning, this exact moment, is not the same as the you from last year or from those broken days. You are breathing differently, thinking differently, and most importantly, you're daring to question who you are in a different way. Every time you realize you no longer want to live under old labels, a door inside you opens just slightly, inviting you to step into a new version of yourself. And when you step through that door, everything begins to change from the inside long before it changes on the outside. There are seasons in life when we think we're trying, but in reality, we're just running after people, running after validation, running after a sense of lack we don't even know how to name. I used to do that. Waking up every morning with a long list of things I had to achieve. Results, attention, opportunities, relationships. The more I tried, the farther they felt. The more I chased, the more exhausted I became. Then I realized there is a profound difference between chasing and attracting. They may sound similar, but they come from two completely different inner states. Chasing comes from scarcity. I don't have enough, so I must find it. I'm not good enough yet, so I must prove myself. It is a run without a finish line. Even when you reach something, the insecurity inside pushes you to chase the next thing. You're not truly living. You're just pursuing. Attracting is different. It doesn't come from lack. It comes from fullness, clarity, and intention. It doesn't ask, How do I get that? It asks, who do I need to become so that what I want comes naturally to me? The law of attraction is not just thinking positively and hoping the universe responds. It is the alignment of right belief, right behavior, and right frequency. And everything you need begins not from goals but from identity. James Clear wrote in Atomic Habits, "The goal is not to run a marathon, the goal is to become a runner." That sentence made me pause for a long time. We often focus on what we want instead of focusing on who we must become to keep what we want when it arrives. I remember a friend who lived in Boston, Elijah. He used to struggle endlessly to find a job. Hundreds of CVs sent out, workshops attended, LinkedIn networking, books on career strategy. Nothing changed. Until he stopped, not to give up, but to ask, am I trying to become someone or just trying to be chosen? He began to shift how he lived. Instead of seeking invitations, he built his personal brand. Instead of craving recognition, he learned to truly create value. He wrote blogs, started a podcast, supported the local startup community, and then something strange happened. 1 month later, opportunity appeared. A company found him through an article. The interview was simply a confirmation of what they had already seen. He was the right fit before the job title ever existed. We don't attract what we want. We attract what is aligned with the person we are becoming each day. I think of a powerful line from Dr. David Yonggi Cho. You don't pray for things. You become someone who can hold the answer. When you focus on becoming instead of grabbing, everything shifts. You no longer try to squeeze yourself into a room that wasn't meant for you. You build a room with the light that matches you, and what's meant for you walks in. You no longer feel drained from pretending. You live authentically. And authenticity carries its own gravity. From that moment on, you don't need to run anymore. You stand, you align, you attract. If you've ever felt exhausted from running without stopping, maybe it's not because you're not fast enough, but because you've been running in the wrong direction. And when you return to the one thing that truly matters, who you are becoming in the process, everything begins to change in ways that no longer require force. There is a sad but common truth. Many people are living their lives as if they are watching a movie they have no permission to touch the script of. They move through each day like an audience member in their own story, observing, reacting, waiting, but never truly stepping onto the stage to write something new. Psychology describes this as the difference between two ways of living. Life happens to me, and life happens through me. In the first way of living, you always feel pulled. You believe everything is predetermined. Circumstances, people, luck, all deciding where you will end up. In the second, you recognize this. You cannot always control what happens, but the way you respond, the way you continue, that part is always yours to write. You can tell you're living in the first mode when these three patterns repeat themselves. Blame. You always have someone or something to blame. Your past, your family, society, even yourself. Wait. You postpone decisions, waiting for the perfect moment, perfect skill, perfect luck. Wish. You wish. Hope. Imagine, but never actually act toward what you want. All of these are signs that you're sitting in the audience instead of standing on the stage of your own life. I once watched a short documentary about an independent filmmaker in Seattle. No big budget, no professional crew, but he still decided to shoot his first film with a phone and natural light. He said a sentence I never forgot. I couldn't wait for a script to land on my table, so I wrote it myself. You don't need to be a filmmaker to understand this, because every day you are handed a blank script called Today. The question is, will you wait for someone else to write it, or will you pick up the pen? I once met an older woman in New York named Mary Ann. She spent her whole life working as a receptionist, raising 3 children. But at age 62, she began writing a book. Not for fame, simply because she said, I've spent my whole life following someone else's script. Now I want to write the last chapter my way. 3 years later, she self-published her first book. It didn't hit any bestseller list, and the media never noticed. But she smiled, softly, and said, "This is the first time I feel like I lived a whole day instead of just existing in it." That sentence to me was a gentle but awakening bell. If you're not writing your story, someone else already is. It might be a job that doesn't love you, a relationship that keeps you small, an old belief planted when you were too young to question it. But you're not that young anymore. Now you have awareness, you have choice, you have opportunity. And the miracle is you can start on any page. No one said you must continue the old chapter. Sometimes, changing just one sentence in your mind each morning is enough to shift the direction of the story. You don't need a grand program or a dramatic revolution. You only need to remember, you are the author, not the audience. And when you live with that spirit, even ordinary days become scenes worth rewriting. There is something more precious than money, rarer than time, and so often spent unconsciously. Your energy, not physical energy, but mental energy. The quiet, invisible kind that determines almost every choice you make in a day, whether you have enough clarity to respond kindly to a frustrating email, enough patience to listen to your child after a long day, enough focus to finish the project you've postponed for 3 weeks. Most people measure their life by time. But the truth is, you can have an entire day and still do nothing. If you no longer have the energy to focus, to choose well, to stay present with yourself. I used to imagine energy like a flame. Energy is like fire. Powerful when contained, dangerous when spread thin. A flame, when gathered in the right place, at the right moment, can cook a meal, warm an entire room, or forge a sword. But when that flame leaks, through 100 phone notifications, through unnecessary conversations, through the constant pressure to respond immediately, it no longer warms anyone. It only burns you down slowly. We live in an age where busyness has become a badge of honor, as if the more overwhelmed you are, the more valuable you must be. But behind that pace, so many people are spending their most sacred energy on things that never truly give anything back. I used to be one of them. A packed schedule, notifications on all day, always replying instantly just to feel like I wasn't falling behind. But when everything eventually cracked, I realized one thing. The only treasure worth protecting is clarity. And to keep that clarity, I had to learn to guard my energy as if it were a lifeline. So I began trying a few small things. Time blocking. Dividing my day into clear blocks. Not just for work, but for silence. Digital boundaries, turning off almost all notifications, checking messages only at intentional times. White space planning, leaving 1 to 2 hours blank each day, not for anything specific, but to make space for the unexpected or simply for myself. At first, I felt like I was falling behind, but soon I realized for the first time in a long time, I was living without feeling drained at the end of every single day. I remember a profound teaching from Dr. David Yonggi. When asked how he could lead hundreds of thousands of people and still keep his inner clarity, he simply said, "Spiritual solitude is not isolation. It is clarity. When I am alone with God, I return to myself." Silence is not withdrawal from the world. It is the place where you gather your flame so that when the moment comes, you can burn for something that truly matters. You don't need to control everything to feel at peace. You only need to know where you return, what boundaries you refuse to cross, and which moments deserve the full force of your energy. Because only when you protect what is most precious within you does the world begin to learn how to treat you accordingly. There are days when you wake up and feel charged with energy. Everything seems possible, every goal looks clear, every plan feels within reach. And then there are other mornings. You open your eyes and cannot even remember why you once wanted to begin. And if you rely solely on motivation to move forward, you will eventually circle back to where you started. Motivation is a feeling. It comes, it goes, and it is easily shaped by sleep quality, the weather, a single negative comment, or simply a gray morning. Discipline, on the other hand, is a muscle. You are not born with it, but you can build it bit by bit. Repetition by repetition. Morning after morning when you get out of bed, not because you feel inspired, but because you chose to live according to what you committed to. Neuroscience reveals something fascinating. The brain is not very good at relying on willpower. Willpower is like a phone battery. The more you use it, the faster it drains. But habits are different. Once imprinted into the nervous system, they operate almost automatically. You don't have to convince yourself to brush your teeth every morning. You just do it. In the same way, successful people aren't consistent because they always feel inspired. They're consistent because they build a system that helps them act even when inspiration disappears. I think of two friends of mine. Both set the same goal: live healthier. One went to the gym 3 times during the first week, then skipped 3 weeks because he felt it wasn't working. Then he restarted the next month. New book, new sportswear, new goals. And yet, he always ended up back at the beginning. The other friend started quietly. No social media posts, no flashy purchases. She made one small promise to herself. No matter what happens, I will show up at the gym every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. No waiting for motivation, no need for instant results. I just need to show up. 3 years passed. The first friend is still restarting. The second, she not only has a healthier body, she has a new job, a new circle of friends, and an entirely new view of herself. Because what she built was not a body. It was discipline. I still remember a sentence I once taped to my bathroom mirror during a season when I often quit. Discipline is not punishment. It is preparation. Preparation for the days you feel tired. Preparation for the moments you doubt yourself. Preparation for the life you know is meant for you, but aren't strong enough yet to hold on to. Discipline isn't glamorous. It isn't quick. It doesn't deliver instant reward, but it quietly builds the foundation that motivation alone can never replace. The difference is never in what you do once when you feel inspired, but in what you continue to do when no one is clapping, no one is watching, and nothing feels new. Because in those moments, you stop being someone who chases a dream. You become someone capable of keeping it. There is something that sounds beautiful when you repeat it. I am enough. And yes, it's true. You don't need to prove your worth to exist. You don't need to strain yourself to be deserving of love, kindness, or the chance to begin again. But sometimes that very truth becomes a soft chair we no longer want to stand up from. We say, I am enough, but deep inside we use it as an excuse to avoid what we know is waiting for us. The line between self-acceptance and self-complacency is incredibly thin, and if we're not paying attention, we easily confuse loving ourselves with stopping our growth because growth feels inconvenient. I once met a woman named Jenna, an elementary school teacher in Oregon. She was dedicated, adored by students and parents alike. But during a small group conversation, she admitted that she felt she had hit the ceiling. She once dreamed of opening a creative learning center, designing her own curriculum, empowering children from difficult backgrounds. But then she told herself, I'm fine. I have a good job. I'm appreciated. I don't need anything more. Yet deep down, she knew she was using comfort to avoid stepping into something larger. Not because she wasn't enough, but because she feared that if she went further, she might not be enough anymore. That is the confusion between fullness and stopping, between gratitude and missed opportunities, between honoring the journey so far and hiding from the journey ahead. True growth does not come because you feel inadequate. It comes from another place, a place where you've looked at yourself with gratitude. And from that very gratitude, you choose to become a larger version of yourself. Not to be loved more, but to live more truthfully. It is the shift from gratitude to healthy ambition. You don't move forward because you lack. You move forward because you know you were made for more. I still remember something Dr. David Yonggi Cho once said. God never calls the qualified, He qualifies the called. You don't need to be perfect to be chosen. But when you are called, when you are awakened by a dream, an idea, a quiet inner urging, you are invited into a new process. A process not meant to prove your worth, but to expand your capacity, to receive more and to give more. You are enough. And because you are enough, you can rise. Not because you must perfect yourself to become worthy, but because you are already worthy enough to be invited forward. Just like a seed that contains everything within it long before it becomes a tree, you carry something inside you, not yet unfolded, not yet visible, but undeniably alive. And it is that very fullness that makes it impossible for you to remain inside your old limits. The world today is not short of noise. Every morning, before you even have the chance to ask yourself how you feel, hundreds of outside voices have already rushed in. News feeds, notifications, ads, messages, all competing to tell you who you should be, what you should do, how you should live, and how fast you should be running. What's frightening is that some of those voices no longer sound foreign. You hear them and don't even realize they're not yours. A voice telling you to do more, because someone your age is already successful. Another whispering that you need to be thinner, more noticeable, the best version of yourself. Not because you choose to, but because you feel you must. And then there are the quiet expectations hidden in family comments and glances. At your age, you still haven't. Slowly, in that crowd of noise, the most important voice begins to fade. Your own. I once worked with a young man named Aiden. Brilliant, gifted, yet always feeling lost. Unsure of what he wanted, what he should do, or whether he was even living the right life. He once dreamed of pursuing art, but others told him to choose something practical. He loved sharing ideas, writing, creating. But fear of judgment muted that part of him. He did all the right things, according to someone else's definition, and over time, he could no longer hear any voice that truly belonged to him. That feeling isn't rare. It begins subtly. A small doubt creeping in when you're happy, asking, am I allowed to feel this way? It grows when you begin living to please, instead of living honestly. And if it lasts long enough, you start mistaking outside voices for your inner compass. But you can find your way back, not through noise, through stillness, through a gentle reminder to write your voice back into your own life. I once suggested something simple to Aiden. Every morning, spend 3 minutes writing down 3 statements that are true about himself, not based on fleeting feelings, but on the deeper truths he knew in his heart. They didn't have to be positive. They just had to be real. For example, I am someone learning to hear myself again. I don't need the right direction immediately. I just need to not turn my back on my calling. I don't need speed. I need truth. And after writing, he would read them aloud, hearing his own voice not as a whisper in his mind, but as a spoken commitment. After some time, he wrote more consistently, smiled more, and stopped asking me what he should do. He started asking, what makes me feel alive? During a private conversation with someone I deeply respect, I once heard a line that stayed with me. Your inner voice is not your ego, it's your essence. The ego is the shell, the reaction, the fear. But the essence, the true core, is quiet, steady, gentle. It never shouts. It doesn't compare, doesn't mock, doesn't push. It simply invites. And when you are quiet enough to hear it, it becomes an irreplaceable guide. If today you feel lost, maybe it's not because you are on the wrong path, but because the outside noise is just too loud. Step back for a moment, turn the volume down, and ask yourself, which voice is real? And which voice have I mistaken as mine simply because it's familiar? When you reclaim that inner stillness, even for a few minutes each morning, you are already moving in the right direction. Not toward the direction of the crowd, but toward the true axis of your own soul. Life sometimes feels like a furnace. You don't ask to step into it, you're not warned ahead of time, but suddenly you find yourself standing in the heat with no choice but to move forward or collapse. Everyone goes through seasons like this: an unexpected job loss, a loved one leaving, health breaking down, plans falling apart. No one teaches us how to be ready for these things, because no one is ever truly ready. Yet it is precisely in these moments that resilience is forged. I remember a cousin of mine named Daniel. He once had a good job, a happy little family, and a life that seemed steady. Then within 6 months, he lost his job. His marriage cracked, and he discovered a medical condition that would require long-term treatment. He told me it was the first time he felt life slip out of his control. Instead of pretending to be strong, he allowed himself to fall apart, and then stood back up bit by bit. Every morning during treatment, he walked slowly around the neighborhood. No goals, no performance, just a quiet reminder that he was still here. Little by little, that small act became an anchor. He found a new job, mended relationships that had been strained, and most importantly, he said, "I'm not who I used to be, but not in a bad way. I am the refined version." What Daniel went through has a name in psychology: post-traumatic growth. It is a strange but real phenomenon. When instead of collapsing after hardship, people grow in ways their peaceful selves could never reach. They become deeper, braver, more understanding, and often gentler with themselves. Not because suffering is good, but because in suffering we discover what cannot be taken from us: our essence, our belief, and the strength that lives in simply continuing. A friend once told me something I've held on to ever since. Faith doesn't remove pressure, it gives it purpose. Faith does not extinguish the fire. It simply lets you know that you are not burning for nothing. Adversity doesn't disappear, but it gains direction. Like the blade being shaped under heat, like the weight that forms a raw diamond. And the strange thing is, often the most painful things become the clearest proof that you are stronger than you ever believed. No one chooses adversity, but when it comes, you have the right to let it crush you or let it forge you. Pressure is not a sign that you are losing. It is the evidence that the old version of you cannot remain where you now stand. And the version rising within you needs this very heat to appear. There's something that sounds paradoxical, yet it's true. Many people never become their best selves, not because they lack ability, but because they keep waiting for the moment they feel like that person. Like waiting to feel confident before stepping on stage, waiting to feel ready before submitting the application, waiting to feel perfect before saying, "This is who I am." But the truth is simple. Behavior creates emotion, not the other way around. When you start acting as if you are already that person, even while your mind is still full of doubt, you are sending a signal to your brain: this is the version of me I choose to step into. Slowly, your nervous system, your thinking, and even the way people respond to you begin to shift accordingly. Behavioral psychology calls this the act as if principle, behaving as if you are already the person you are becoming. Not to pretend, but to move ahead of your feelings and build a foundation for your new identity. I once worked with a woman named Claire, a university lecturer, a single mother, and someone who always felt not professional enough to pursue her dream of becoming an author. She wrote a few chapters, then stopped. Her reason? Because I'm not a real writer. I'm just someone who writes for fun. I asked her, what would a real writer do tomorrow morning? She paused, then answered, they would wake up 1 hour earlier to write. And not wait for inspiration. I said, then do that. Not because you've succeeded yet, but because that's what a successful person would do. So Claire began adjusting her life, little by little. She wrote every morning before her child woke up. She told friends she was finishing her first book instead of hiding it. She reread each chapter as if someone else would read it soon. 3 months later, she finished her first full manuscript, not because she suddenly gained more talent, but because she walked like the woman she had once prayed to become. A practical way for you to begin is to try journaling from the point of view of your 1 year older self. Not, I hope I will, but I am someone who wakes early each day to care for my mental health. I choose calmness in difficult conversations. I live in alignment with my values even when no one is watching. Write it. Read it aloud. Repeat it every morning as if you are retraining the operating system inside you. Because transformation rarely happens through one big decision. It happens through repeated steps, quietly reaffirming, I'm here. I'm not waiting anymore. I once wrote a sentence and taped it above my desk, reading it every day. You don't become your future self. You return to it. The version you are trying to reach is not something foreign or distant. It has always been inside you, just buried beneath doubt, delay, and the expectations of others. You don't need to play a role. You just need to remember who you already are and walk with the courage of that memory. Today, walk like the person you've been praying to become. Don't wait to feel ready. Just begin, and let each step slowly reveal the person you were designed to be.